Hey everybody, we are going to chat a little bit today about 5-2, Final Project Milestone 3. So as we chatted about with Milestone 2, with Milestone 1 a little bit, we want to make sure that we're doing is taking a very specific look at the instructions. So I'm here within the module, okay? And then from here, what I'm going to do is go to the Milestone 3 guidelines and rubrics link here. Now, you can read it from here. This is great. This is all good information, but going here will allow us to see not just the uh, question, but it also allow us to take a look at the rubric. Okay, so let's see. All right, so what we want to take a look at is just the context, and this is going to give us a lot of important information here in this first paragraph. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm kind of going to give you an idea of where we started and how we've gotten to where we are and what we're doing next. Okay, so the first milestone is an introduction. It gives us really four key concepts that we've talked about before, and that's the budget, funding, workforce structure, and culture. Okay. Now, we're in milestone 1, we took a broad look at all 4 of those elements and we tied them into the mission, into the service delivery, and we talked about current trends into why we're addressing the culture, the workforce structure with budget and funding, and we posed a problem that we need to change and address, right? So we talked about this at length in our last milestone video, that one key element we absolutely have to understand is that we have a current state of the agency that needs to be changed. Right? And in the previous milestone instructions, it talked about how that problem is the toxic work culture. Okay, so milestone 2, it talks about workforce and culture, workforce structure and culture. So we took that broad stroke that we had in milestone 1, and then we focused specifically on 2 more elements in milestone 2. And now we're going to do our deeper dive focus on budget and funding here in milestone 3. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is using the same sample report that we've already used, either in the context of the fictitious agency that you're presenting on, or just continue, if you did last time, to work on Red Cross or CMC or UNICEF, right? You can continue to use those sample organizations either directly or as the templates for the information you're using for your agency. And we're going to, within that context, move past workforce structure and culture and move into where the money comes from and how we spend it. Okay? And I'm sure that's very exciting to all of us because everybody who goes into human services does so because they want to spend their day in budget spreadsheets. Or not, but we have to remember that this is part of the work part of what we do. If we just got to help people all day directly, that'd be amazing, but there also is the work element in regards to understanding where the money comes from and how we're using it and how we use it ethically. And that's really what this assignment is going to talk about today. Okay, so again, we're going to scroll down from our overview that we just covered. We're going to talk about what specific questions are we answering. Just like I did in our last video, I'm going to skip down from this 3-bullet section here. I want you to read it. Okay, but I don't want to read it to you, but make sure you read this. I want to point out this section here because we ran into challenges with this in milestone 1, right? If your selected strategic plan doesn't include all of the information listed, you can add your own. Now, I want to point something out here before we jump into the rubric. Your strategic plan will not include all the elements you need for this assignment. It absolutely will not. Okay, so you are going to have to go out and find additional information, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you do it and where you get it. Okay, now scroll down here, and we're going to look at it like we did last time. We're going to look at the milestones. Okay, and as we look at, I'm sorry, this is a milestone. We're going to look at the rubric elements. Now, as we look at the rubric elements, we're going to remember that we look at this as a checklist. So if the question is here in number 1, or letter A, based on the relationship between the agency's budget and the delivery of services, explain the need for maintaining a budget based on ethical standards in human services. Now, in the rubric, what are we looking for? Ethical standards. I don't believe this is directly spoken to in any of the service delivery, in any of the sample documents we've given them the strategic plans. We have to make sure that we include this information. If you do not include the ethical standards here, we're going to end up with a not evident, right? And we don't want to do that. That's going to be a huge element. You'll notice we only have, again, 5 criteria, so we're looking roughly at missing one element entirely, automatically this time dropping you down. If we lose 22 points, you automatically start with a 78. You start with a C+. And that's true for all of these elements with the exception of the articulation of response, right? So make sure you're addressing all of these, right? Now, where are you going to get the ethical standards section? Think back to HSE 101. We did an ethical standards review where we looked at ethical guidelines from several different organizations. And the one you can use here is the ethical standards for the National Organization of Human Services. Okay, if you feel that your nonprofit speaks more closely to the, I know a couple of you are doing some counseling agencies, right? If you prefer to use the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics, more power to you. I have no issue with which human services code you use here, as long as I can see how it ties into your agency. Okay, so based on ethical standards, how are we going to develop this budget? Now, I just mentioned that you have to go outside and get an ethical code. That means you automatically know one of your references needs to be that ethical code. Okay, so already we have 2 references that are going to be necessary within this assignment. That's the sample strategic plan that you're utilizing, whether that's the ACA, whether that's the American Red Cross or whether that's UNICEF or whether that's Catholic Medical Center. You've got to use that. Because even if you're using that information to inform your fictitious agency, you're still using that as a reference. And now we know our second reference is going to be, at minimum, is going to be 1 ethical code. Okay, so there's 2 references. Now, down here in the next section, we're looking here, we're going to say, describe how decisions regarding personnel changes and the agency's budget influence the quality of program services. Look at these bold elements here. You notice trend? Okay, so these bold elements in these questions are really the key to each element that we're discussing. So delivery of service, you've heard me really harp on the service delivery element, and now you can see that that's tying into both of these questions. Okay, so how are these changes going to address the delivery of services and the quality of program? So what does that mean? We have to be able to define what service we're delivering, and we have to be able to define how personnel can feed into the quality of this. So service delivery has been a little bit of a challenge so far in our assignments, and I want to take a moment to talk about what service delivery is. Okay, and a lot of you have gotten this in the feedback in your papers. Service delivery is what I do during my workday if I work for your agency. Why did you hire me? How do I serve the community? What do I physically do to make the community better in this nonprofit? As a mental health professional, right, I worked in counseling. So what I did, my service delivery was to deliver crisis intervention supports to kiddos in the juvenile justice and foster care system and their families, right? And that was most of the work that I did for many years. That's what I did every day. That was the service delivery. Now, the quality of the service delivery and how that's impacted by the budget speaks to what tools do I need, what level of job satisfaction, what training do I have to have. Okay, so your budget should speak to that. Your budget should speak to how you're going to give the people in your agency who are delivering the service the resources they need to do their jobs. One of the milestone 2s that I graded really spoke very well to this point, where it was literally tools, right? And in that sample, that example, you're building shelter for people, right? And you had a relationship with a for-profit company that was helping you by giving you tools. What do your people need to do the job right? Now, in our sample, what we're talking about here from the prompt is we have this toxic work culture. So maybe how you're impacting service delivery with this budget is by increasing the resources that you have in your salary. Maybe it's by increasing your training. Maybe it's by doing retraining. Maybe it's by hiring more people, right? But you've got to speak in this element to how that budget is going to help your people deliver the service. All right. Now, budget and funding and grant funding. Where's your money coming in? Now, we talked about this. Budget is the money going out. Funding is coming in. So our first 2 elements talk about how we're going to do our budgeting. The third element here talks about where the money's coming from, right? So some of you have talked about how you're going to increase the number of donors that you have. Some of you have talked about how you're going to get more donors. So you're going to leave a static amount of money coming in from the people that you currently are getting money from, but get more people to donate. Some of you have talked about how you're applying for grants from the government, right? What we really need to do here is talk specifically about where we're going to get our money. And if our budget is asking us to spend more, we have to talk about how we're going to get more. Okay, so here, if you're going to use an example of another nonprofit, how they're raising money, there's another reference. Okay, now element 4 here, excuse me, budget and funding, future funding sources. This is tough. I will not going to lie, this is hard. What you have to do here is go back and say, all right, we figured out we need to spend more money on personnel. And we need to spend more money on personnel because we have to meet one or more ethical standards. And then we're going to raise that money by reaching out to more donors. So how does that proposal impact for future funding sources? Maybe that's because you're tapping out your fundraising market. Maybe you only have so many people that are willing to give to this cause in your area, and that's all you can find. Maybe it's that to the exact opposite. Maybe by partnering with more people, you're getting your name out there more, and they're finding other people to donate as well, right? But you've got to find an example of what things are going to look like differently for your future funding based on the changes that you're making now. That's subjective. That's going to involve some critical thinking. That's not something you can necessarily go to a source and say. So you've really got to think that through, right? Now, you can go ahead and take a look at some other elements of how other agencies have done this. You can search that online, and if you do so, awesome. Just go ahead and make sure you include that as a reference. Speaking of references, that is a good segue down to our articulation of response. Now, again, we've gotten a lot better at this since the week 1 assignments, right? But we're still seeing some elements in which we're not including references at all. We're not including the right citation, the right references, or we're not including enough references. Now, if you haven't gotten feedback from me that says you need to change something about your references, you're good. Okay, but if you have gotten feedback that's saying, hey, this isn't the right kind, or look here, or you don't have any, make sure you're integrating that. Okay, so I want to point this out. So the 0 level, the not evident here, is submission has critical errors related to citations, grammar, spelling, syntax, or organization. If you don't have a reference, that's a critical error, and I can't give you any points. So you're going to lose 12 points. Okay? If you've got a couple of references, or you've got one reference but it isn't kind of in the right direction, then you're going to end up on needs improvement. But it's pretty easy to get full points on this section. So first of all, proofread carefully. I don't take a lot of points off for spelling errors and that kind of thing. It's unusual that you drop from proficient to needs improvement unless I just can't tell that you tried, right, to format and spell check appropriately. But if you include the textbook as a reference, and then on top of the textbook you include the sample strategic plan you're using, and then on top of that you include the ethical code that you're using, right there you're going to get 100% of the points in articulation of response, so that gives you 12 points. Okay, so I don't like to see people lose points on here for 2 reasons. One, because at any college level assignment, you've got to be able to say where you got your information. That's the difference between college level work and us having a conversation on Facebook or Reddit about human services. Okay, we can all know what we know. We can all have our own opinion. How we make it college level and scholarly is providing supporting information about those opinions and assertions that we're making. And then number 2, I don't like to see people losing points on it because it's not really that tough. Right? So remember, back in Milestone 1, you were asked to build a bibliography. If you did that during your first assignment or during your resubmission, then all you have to do is continue forward by adding any references that you've used in addition. Okay, and once you start building that, what you realize is from milestone to milestone, you're going to be using the same references, and you're going to be able to submit the same ones for the final. So just make sure you take time and make sure you pay attention there. Now, if you have any questions, you can always email me, s.matthews@snhu.edu, and I'm happy to chat with you guys. I'm probably going to get another video announcement out about just regular housekeeping stuff and where we stand with grading either tonight or tomorrow. I hope you're all having a good day. Bye now.